When a man who shaped generations finally looks back, his favorite songs are not memories, they are the fingerprints of his soul. Born in 1942, Paul McCartney rose from post-war Liverpool to global legend, carrying grief, hope, and melody through decades of changing music and human longing. So when Paul, at 83, named his 5 favorite Beatles songs, it wasn't a ranking, it was a life speaking softly. Song 1, Let It Be. For Paul McCartney, Let It Be did not begin as a hit. It began as a dream. In one of the darkest periods of his life, when the Beatles were slowly drifting apart and pressure pressed in from every direction, Paul dreamed of his mother. Mary McCartney had died when he was only 14, a loss that never truly left him. In the dream, she stood beside him and spoke gently, telling him not to fight what he could not control. Let it be, she said. When he woke, the melody was already alive in his mind, as if it had been waiting for him. He sat at the piano and played what he remembered. The words followed naturally, not as poetry, but as comfort. Paul was not trying to write something great. He was trying to survive a moment. And in doing so, he wrote one of the most comforting songs the world would ever know. Paul has said many times that Let It Be was his way of holding on to something pure while everything else was breaking. The band was arguing, lawyers were circling, friendships were cracking under fame and exhaustion. But this song came from a quieter place. It came from love, memory, and a voice that had once protected him as a child. What Paul respects most about Let It Be is its honesty. There is no clever trick in it, no disguise. The piano is simple, the words are plain. But together, they carry something heavy and gentle at the same time. He once said he wanted it to feel like a mother's arms, warm, steady, and safe. Not impressive, not dramatic, just true. In the studio, the song felt different from others. It wasn't about competition or perfection. It was about feeling. Paul sang it not like a performer, but like a son speaking to someone he missed. You can hear it in his voice, the ache, the calm, the acceptance. Every note sounds like it knows where it came from. When the song was released, people didn't just listen, they leaned on it. It played at funerals, in hospitals, during wars, during heartbreak, during moments when people had no words of their own. Let It Be gave them words. It reminded them that not every problem needs to be solved, some just need to be carried gently. For Paul, seeing people sing it back to him is still emotional. He has said that when crowds sing those lines, it feels like the song no longer belongs to him. It belongs to everyone who has lost someone. Everyone who has been afraid. Everyone who needed to hear that it's okay to stop fighting sometimes. The impact of Let It Be on Paul's life is deep. It taught him that his greatest songs were not the cleverest ones, but the most honest. It showed him that music could heal, not just entertain, that a personal pain could become shared peace. If you remember hearing this song on the radio for the first time, you know what it felt like. The world seemed quieter for a moment. Softer, like someone had placed a hand on your shoulder and said, "You're not alone." That is why, at 80, when Paul names Let It Be as one of his favorites, it isn't because it is famous. It is because it is true. It is his mother's voice, his younger self's pain, and the proof that even in chaos, something gentle can still be born. Song 2, Penny Lane. For Paul McCartney, Penny Lane is not just a song, it is a street that still lives inside him. Long before stadiums and screaming crowds, before money and fame and pressure, there was a simple place in Liverpool where life felt small and safe. Penny Lane was a real street. Paul walked it as a boy. He waited for buses there. He watched people there. He learned how ordinary lives carried quiet stories. When Paul wrote Penny Lane, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't chasing a hit. He was remembering the barber who showed photographs of every head he'd had the pleasure to know. Remembering the banker and his motor car. Remembering faces that never made history, but made his childhood. The song came from a deep place of longing. Fame had taken Paul far from home, and like many who leave, he began to miss what he once thought was ordinary. He missed knowing everyone's name. He missed walking without being watched. He missed the feeling that nothing bad could happen because the world was still small. What Paul respects most about Penny Lane is its detail. Every line is a brushstroke. He painted his past not with sadness, but with affection. He didn't make his childhood perfect, he made it human. There are gray skies, there are rainy days. But there is warmth in remembering them. In the studio, Paul treated the song like a memory album. Every sound mattered. The trumpet solo wasn't just decoration, it was joy. The harmonies weren't just music, they were brotherhood. He wanted the song to feel like walking down a street where every door held a story. When Penny Lane reached listeners, something magical happened. People who had never been to Liverpool suddenly felt homesick for a place they'd never seen. They thought of their own streets, their own barbers, their own bus stops. Paul had turned his personal memory into a shared one. Live, the song always made him smile. He could see it in people's eyes. They weren't just listening, they were traveling, going back to summers that never seemed to end, to friends who had moved away, to parents who were younger, to a time when life felt lighter. The impact of Penny Lane on Paul's life is powerful. It reminded him that success doesn't erase where you came from, it makes you miss it more. It taught him that the smallest details often hold the biggest emotions. That memory is not about regret, but gratitude. Paul has said that growing up doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering with kindness. Penny Lane is his proof of that. A song that says you can leave home, but home never really leaves you. If you ever hear this song and suddenly think of your own childhood street, your own special place, then you understand why Paul still loves it. It is not about Liverpool, it is about belonging. That is why, at 80, when Paul names Penny Lane as one of his favorites, he is not choosing a hit, he is choosing a piece of his heart. Song 3, Yesterday. Yesterday did not arrive like most songs. It arrived complete. Paul woke up one morning with the melody already inside him. Every note felt finished, every movement felt right. He rushed to the piano, afraid it might disappear if he waited too long. What came out was Yesterday. At first, Paul didn't believe he had written it. The melody felt too perfect, too familiar, like something that had always existed. He played it for friends, asking if they had heard it before. He worried he had stolen it without knowing. No one recognized it, but everyone felt like they should have. That frightened him more than praise ever could. The words came later, shaped by loss, regret, and quiet pain. Paul didn't write Yesterday about one person. He wrote it about a feeling about how life can change in a single moment, and how nothing ever feels the same after. It was the most honest song he had ever written, and that honesty scared him. What Paul respects most about Yesterday is its vulnerability. There is no hiding in it. No loud guitars, no clever tricks, just one voice and a few strings. When the Beatles heard it, they didn't know what to do with it. John and George couldn't find a place inside it. Ringo had nothing to play. So Paul recorded it alone, backed only by a string quartet. It was the first time he stood completely by himself inside the band. His voice was exposed. Every breath could be heard. Every weakness was visible. But that was the point. The song demanded truth, not strength. When Yesterday was released, something unexpected happened. It didn't belong to one story, it belonged to everyone. People heard their own losses inside it. Lost love, lost youth, lost chances, lost versions of themselves that could never return. The song became a mirror. Other artists began covering it almost immediately. Each one found their own sadness in Paul's words. It proved that music does not belong to the writer, it belongs to the listener. Paul still sings Yesterday differently every time. Sometimes it is quiet and broken, sometimes strong and accepting. The melody never changes, but the emotion always does. Because yesterday is not a day, it is a feeling that follows people through their lives. The impact of Yesterday on Paul is deep. It taught him that fear is often a sign of truth, that the songs that scare you to share are usually the ones people need most. It showed him that being gentle can be more powerful than being loud. If you remember hearing Yesterday for the first time, you know how it felt. Like someone had said what you couldn't. like a door had opened to something you were trying not to feel. That is why, at 80, when Paul names Yesterday as one of his favorites, he is not choosing success, he is choosing honesty. Because in that song, he didn't try to be great, he tried to be real. Song 4, A Day in the Life. A Day in the Life was never meant to be easy. It was born from fragments, unfinished thoughts, half songs, moments that didn't seem to belong together. John had written a piece inspired by newspaper stories. A young man killed in a car crash, holes in the road, everyday tragedy turned into quiet poetry. Paul had something else short, bright, rushed, about waking up, getting dressed, catching a bus, living an ordinary day. On paper, they didn't match. Different moods, different speeds, different worlds. But the Beatles had a rare gift. They could take pieces that didn't belong and make them belong. When John and Paul looked at each other and decided to join their parts, something new was born, not just a song, but a moment in music that felt larger than time. Paul remembers feeling that this was not just another track. This was something fragile and powerful at the same time. John's voice floated like he was speaking from far away, reporting life as if from another place. Paul's section came in like movement life, rushing forward, clocks ticking, people going somewhere. What Paul respects most about A Day in the Life is its courage. It didn't try to be safe. It didn't try to fit. It trusted feeling over rules. The famous orchestra Build Those Rising Wild Strings was an experiment with no clear plan. The musicians were told to start at the lowest note they could play and rise to the highest, however they felt. Chaos turned into beauty. In the studio, it felt like stepping into the unknown. No one had done this before, not in pop music. Critics didn't know what to call it. Some said it was nonsense, then they called it genius. But Paul didn't care about labels. He cared that it felt honest, that it sounded like life confusing, beautiful, ordinary, strange. The song showed Paul what collaboration could really mean, that two different minds could become one voice, that disagreement could create greatness. That friendship, even when imperfect, could build something unforgettable. When people heard it, they didn't just listen, they wondered. They felt like the world had grown larger. Music was no longer just entertainment. It was art. It was thought. It was feeling without clear answers. The impact of A Day in the Life on Paul is lasting. It reminds him of what the Beatles could be when they trusted each other, when ego disappeared and creation took over, when four young men believed that music could be anything they imagined. If you remember hearing it for the first time, you know how strange and exciting it felt, like something had changed, even if you couldn't explain how. That is why, at 80, when Paul names A Day in the Life as one of his favorites, he is choosing not comfort, but courage. The courage to try, to fail, to blend, to believe that music could hold the whole world inside it. Song 5, Here Comes the Sun. Here Comes the Sun was not Paul's song, but in many ways, it became his favorite. George Harrison wrote it during a quiet escape from tension. Business meetings, contracts, arguments, everything had become heavy. One day, George sat in Eric Clapton's garden with an acoustic guitar. It was the first warm day after a long, dark winter. The sun came out, and so did the song. When Paul first heard it, he felt something rare, pure, light. No weight, no struggle, just relief. He immediately knew this was special. Not because it was complex, but because it was simple in the most honest way. What Paul respects most about Here Comes the Sun is its innocence. After years of heavy themes, experiments, and emotional storms, this song felt like breathing again. The lyrics were almost childlike, and that's what made them powerful. They didn't explain life. They celebrated it. In the studio, recording it felt different. The tension that had followed the band slowly melted. Paul's bass danced around George's guitar like old friends who had forgotten how good it felt to laugh together. The harmonies felt like peace returning. The Moog synthesizer added new colors, but never took away the song's gentle heart. Paul has said that when they played this song, it felt like remembering why they started making music at all, not for fame, not for money, but to make people feel better. And people did feel better. The song became a comfort, played on hard days, on hopeful mornings, at weddings, in hospitals, for people who needed to believe that dark seasons do not last forever, that winter always ends. Paul watched people heal through this song. He saw smiles where there had been fear, tears that came not from sadness, but from relief. He realized that sometimes the greatest gift music can give is hope. The impact of "Here Comes the Sun" on Paul is deeply emotional. Even now, when he plays it, he feels that same quiet joy. Not excitement, but gratitude. It reminds him of friendship, of forgiveness, of the simple miracle of waking up and feeling light again. That is why, at 80, when Paul names "Here Comes the Sun" as one of his favorites, he is choosing optimism. The belief that no matter how dark things become, something warm is always waiting on the other side.